Today I'm going to show you how to wire any 220 volt receptacle to hook up any ASIC miner. So for the S19, for example, you're going to need 220 volt receptacles for 2 plugins, and for an Avalon, for example, or other ones that require a single plug-in, I'll show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to start at the wall in my garage. I'll show you how to wire those up, and then I'll come back in and I'll guide on how to wire them into your electrical panel. So I'll head to the garage and I'll show you what tools and equipment you're going to need for the job. So here's the tools and supplies you're going to need for the job. So you need some wire connectors. You can see where the yellow is there, 18 to 12 gauge, or the red ones are 14 to 12 gauge. So just get something that fits 12 gauge wire. You're going to need some number 0 bushings. What these are for is for the AC90 armored wiring. That's just going to go around the wire and into the sheath of the wire, and that's just going to protect the metal from cutting into the wire. You need some wire strippers, a test stick, you're going to need a number 1 and a number 2 Robertson screwdriver. You need some linesman pliers. So basically this is just regular pliers slash side cutters. They're a combination plier. Electrical tape. You're gonna need some 3/8 cable fittings, and you can see right on the package it's designed for the AC90 armored wiring. You're gonna need whatever length of the armored wiring you'll need for the job to get from your panel through your circuit to wherever you're gonna set up your miner. So this AC90 wiring is 12 gauge. 2 junction boxes. So now keep in mind, I'm just using 2 because these are more readily available at hardware stores. They'll probably be easier for you to find as well. But you could also just use 1 box with 2 receptacles and wire them in the same box. There's multiple options out there. 2 of the covers. And you're also going to need 2 20 amp 250 volt receptacles. One thing that you'll notice if you don't ever see them in a box is you'll see that they have 2 brass screws on each side. Brass to black, which is your hot wires. There's going to be using 2 hot wires and a ground for wiring 220. So that's the difference between the 110s and the 220s. Alternatively, some other options that you can use instead of these exact tools, there's always other stuff out there. For example, if you don't have a test stick, you can always use a multimeter or some other type of volt tester. Instead of the Robertsons, you could just use an impact driver with whatever bit from a bit set. Some other things you might need: some fasteners for securing your line to whatever material you're using. These will be used for wood. If you're not using armored wiring, you can always use the yellow 12 gauge wire and you can run it through conduit. So there's multiple options. There's flexible conduit, there's rigid conduit, and then again there's the armored wiring. There's a whole bunch of different options out there. You don't have to use the exact same I'm using, but I'm just showing you what I did. Another option, if you don't have this type of wire stripper, some guys prefer this type of wire stripper. So you can use these. If you don't have the Robertson screwdrivers, you can also get away with just a flathead and just for tightening up your ground screws in your receptacle boxes. And if you don't have linesman pliers, you can also just get away with a standard pair of side cutters and some type of needle nose or just regular standard pliers. One other thing to note: North America, this is more commonly a 220 volt receptacle, what they look like. So this type of plug, there's a couple different variations out there, but you'll see on here, it'll say right on there, 20 amp 250 volt. But you might say, okay, well, my S19 came with this type, and obviously that's not going to be compatible. In my next video, I will show you how you can simply just snip the ends off and put a new end on it if you can't find this type, because you don't want to be going using random adapters and stuff. So it's really quick and easy, and just put a new end on your cable. So that's what I did, and I'll show you in just a couple days how you can do that. Almost forgot one more thing you're going to need. I'll post a picture here because I don't have any extra ones kicking around. You're going to need a double pole 20 amp breaker. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take a 6 to 8 inch length of the armored wiring. I'm going to take the armor off and I'm going to cut that off, and we're going to use that for pigtailing later. So we're just going to need an extra length. I'm going to put that to the side. Snip the wires. Now I got 3 additional lengths of 12 gauge wire. I'm going to set these aside for later. Now we're going to strip another piece about that same length. I'm going to take about 8 inches. That's what we're going to use to come into the receptacle box. And the first thing we're going to do, because this is going to be our contact point inside of the receptacle box, we're going to now take one of those number 0 red bushings, and we're going to slide it inside around the wire. Just like that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of our receptacle boxes and we're going to come through the top. Now you can come through the side, whatever way you're wiring it. Just for the sake of example, you know what, this one I'll come through the top on this one. And you'll see that the ground screw's here. Now you're probably wondering, okay, what way do I go? If it's easier to go the ground screw to the way that you're coming in through the box, the closest side, because it'll leave you more wire for pigtailing after. So I'm going to come through the top and I'm going to ground my wire, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to pop out one of these tabs. So you could use a little punch or a hammer if you got it kicking around, or else you can just simply take a pair of pliers, give it a couple hits. Now you see that tab sitting inside there. Just grab it with your pliers and give it a twist. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of these 3/8 fittings that's going to secure our wire into the receptacle box. So you're going to have a little nut here. Slide this through the top of the box. Take your nut and then fasten this inside the box. Doesn't have to be super tight, but you got to secure it somehow. Okay, now we're just going to tighten this up. A couple ways you can do that. These might work, but you might need something like water pump pliers. I'm just going to do a couple turns if I can get a grip on them. I was able to get a little more. Now all you can do, you can just take a flathead screwdriver, put it on one of the notches, just just give it a couple of hits. And you can see how that was turning that nut. So now that's snug in there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to feed the wiring in through the fitting. Okay, I know it's seated all the way down because right where my finger's pointing here, I can see a little bit of red where that bushing is. So now that's seated as far as it can go. We're gonna go ahead and tighten it up. Again, just make sure it's nice and snug. You don't have to refit until your forearm's cramped or anything, but it's tight, secure, and I can't pull this out. Now I got 3 wires coming into the box. First thing I'm going to show you is if you just need to wire a single receptacle, for some of the miners out there that aren't S19s, it's going to be a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. So I'm going to show you how to do that first. So if I'm just wiring one 220 volt receptacle to the panel, this is the only thing on the circuit, then I don't have to pigtail. So I can just take my wire strippers. You're going to take about 1/2 to 3/4 an inch off of here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our bare copper ground wire and we're going to make a clockwise loop around the grounding screw and secure it to the box. So slightly more trickier if you got a little bit less finger room here, but it's manageable. Okay, so I've made a loop around, and I hope you can see that. Try and get these wires out of the way here for you. Okay, so I made a loop around the box, around the grounding screw, and we're gonna hold that secure, and we're gonna fasten that down. Nice and snug. And that lets us have a bunch of access left over. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make, I just call them candy canes, we're gonna make some candy cane loops at the tips of these cables. So you can take these, but it's a little bit easier to do with something like needle nose. You can get a little more of a cleaner round on them. Trick to this, just put the end of the wire in the very tip versus grabbing it here, and you can get a little more of a cleaner bend. We're going to do clockwise bends with these. Okay, and you can see what that looks like after I'm done. And we're going to do it again for our other hot wire. Okay, so for 220 volt wiring, you have 2 hots instead of a hot, neutral, and a ground. So these 2 hots are just going to connect to each of the brass screws on the receptacle. It doesn't matter which one you put it on. Almost forgot about my ground. We're going to do the same thing with the ground wire. Okay, so we're going to connect our ground to the green screw, Now I can feel that that's around. Don't be afraid to go a little more of a candy cane bend on here. So now I can see I've already came up a little bit short here. It's not a big deal. Just grab it and just give it a little more of a bend. The reason you go clockwise is so when you're tightening the screws on the receptacle, it's gonna grab it and pull it in the right direction. Oop. Okay, now we've got that snug. Now our ground is secured. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of our hot wires and put it on either side of the brass screws. Okay, now I can feel that's secure in place. Just make sure that you got good contact underneath the screw, because you don't want that coming off. And the next thing you're going to do, take this again clockwise around your other brass screw. And fasten it down. Okay, got it nice and snug. We're satisfied that that wire is not going anywhere. Then we can accordion these wires down into the box a little bit, and we're going to do one more thing before we finish off here. Apologize about the camera work. I'm trying to keep her centered here. Now this is an optional step. You don't have to do this, but it's just a nice little added safety feature. So you can take the electrical wire, electrical tape, last thing we're going to do, we're going to take a piece of electrical tape and we're going to wrap it around where the connections are. That's just an added safety feature. So if you ever stuck something in there, or you're fiddling around to try and switch something up, it's going to lower your risk of getting electrocuted in the future. So you can just throw a couple beads of tape around the contacts. Again, you don't have to do this, but it's just another warm and fuzzy thing you can do to protect yourself, make it a little safer. Okay, so I've just wrapped the side with a little bit of electrical tape. Now we can accordion the rest of it into the box. And of course, one other thing, I might as well mention it because I know somebody's probably in the comments is going to say it. You're going to be like, what way are you supposed to put your ground? Up or down? There's a long-standing debate on which way it should go, but the more common method is you're going to have this facing down so you can read the letters as you face it on the wall. So that's just the way I'm going to go with. Now, on the box, you're going to see a couple of holes here. This is going to be where you're going to fasten your receptacle. There's two little screw holes here, and you're going to fasten down your receptacle into that. So now you're going to take your number 1 Robertson and secure those. Easier way to do it, you just start a little bit on each side first. I put the electrical tape around the screw by accident, but that's not a big deal. Hopefully we can just pull her out. Okay, it's free. I'm gonna be changing this anyways, or else I would rewrap that, but it's no big deal. And now I can fasten it down. Miraculously, an impact driver came along out of nowhere. Do little by little. It doesn't get all bent. Okay, so now you'll see, just try and keep this sort of square so your faceplate cover fits on nicely. Just try and keep it in the middle. There we go. And that's more in the middle. Okay. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to put our receptacle cover over the receptacle. And you see these screw holes right here and here. That's what's going to fasten the cover to the receptacle. So we'll get that started a couple turns. And you might have to just take a quick look from the side and make sure it's started and seated. Now they're both going. We're just going to do the speed up. Use my impact driver. And there you have it. I'm ready to plug in my ASIC Miner. So now this is a single receptacle box that'll work perfectly fine for your Avalon, and I'm going to show you how to hook up to the panel after. But if you got an S19, you're going to know how to hook up both of them. So I'm going to show you how to pigtail the wires, run a wire over to your second box, and run a second box on the same circuit. Okay, now we're going to start back from the point of where we grounded that first wire coming into our first receptacle box. We're going to start from there, going into our second box. So to clean these up, start fresh, we're just going to snip these off. And then we're going to re-strip off another ½ inch or so. Okay, I'll just straighten this out a little bit. All right. So now, for this example, we'll just use a receptacle box that's just a short distance away. So that means we're going to punch a hole into that circle center tab. And we're going to come into this box in the exact same spot on the second box. Okay, now we're going to take our cable fittings and we're going to add one to each side of those. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take another length of our armored wire. So we want the armor still protecting in the middle of the length between here. So we got to take 6 to 8 inches on each end. First thing we're going to do again is we're going to put the red number 0 bushings into the end of each side of the armor. It should sit pretty nice and flush in there. Okay, so now we got our bushings in. We're gonna back these screws off a little bit, make sure we got enough room for the wire. And insert our wire into each side. So now you can see where the red bushing is in here. That's seated properly. And we're going to go ahead and tighten this side. Again, obviously you would fasten these to the wall first. You'd have these set up and then you would wire once you're on the wall. But I'm just doing it this way for the sake of demonstration. It's just a little easier. Okay, we're tightened up there. Do the same thing with this end. Okay. Okay, now that's snugged up. We've got our 2 receptacle boxes. We got wire on each end. Next thing I need to do is I'm going to strip these wires down. All right, I got my wire stripped. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to loop this ground wire around our ground screw, and you can see already I barely left enough. I should have left a little bit extra. Always leave a little more. So I'm going to go ahead and just put the candy cane in this one first. Just make it a little easier after. Clockwise around the grounding screw. And we're going to go ahead and fasten that up. Okay, nice and snug. Now, here's what we're gonna do differently for 2 receptacles. We're gonna take those additional lengths of 12 gauge wire we cut off initially, and we're gonna use those to pigtail these wires together. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take all 3 of the ground wires. So the one from this box, the one from the panel, and our additional piece that we'd cut off. We're gonna twist those together with a pair of pliers, and then we're gonna put a wire nut on them, or wire connector, whichever you prefer to call them. So I'll try and get you a little better angle on here. So we're basically gonna try and sit these nice and vertical and straight with each other. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the end of our linesman pliers and kind of grip them with an overhand grip like this, a little bit easier. Apply pressure and then give them a few twists. And just make sure they're staying together and they're not different lengths. It's important. I'll show you what I mean by that in a sec. Okay, so you can see I got a few good twists in here. Okay, and you can see they're relatively the same length at the end. I'm just gonna go ahead, just give it a nice little clean cut off the end, just so it sits nice in the wire connector. And we're gonna go ahead and use a wire nut. We'll try the yellow one first and see if that works. If I need a little more room, a bigger one, I can use the red ones, but if you use the smaller one, you got a little more room to work in the box. You'll notice when it catches, it might take you a couple turns, but it should catch on. You don't, now you can literally twist these things through or they're almost popping out the end. So you don't want to reef them until you can't go anymore, but you just want to make sure they're nice and snug. So now you can feel it's tightening up, nice and snug. Give it a pull test, it's not going to come off. You don't have to do this for your ground wires, but I like to keep everything nice and clean. Okay, now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our first set of hot wires. Then we're gonna take our additional length that we cut off earlier, strip that, strip it on both ends. And we're going to do the same thing. Try and marry them up. It's definitely a little harder to work with 12 gauge wire. 14 is much easier. Just takes a little more elbow grease to get the job done. All right. Go ahead, get a wire nut on them. Okay, nice and snug, no bare wire exposed here at the bottom. That's what you want. You don't want any bare wire exposed at the bottom here. And we're gonna do one more time with our other hot wire. Now normally you're probably thinking, isn't white neutral, well, usually in 110 circuits, you can color code it be your neutral, but for 220s, they're both going to be hot. So you can pretend that they're both black if it makes it easier for you. And you see as I'm twisting it on, it's covering all that exposed wire. And that's how you know you got the right amount snipped off. If you got too much exposed wire, simply just cut off a little bit of the copper on the tip and do it again. Okay, nice and snug. Got all my connectors on. Now, you'll hear guys probably say, if you're a good electrician, you don't need electrical tape. Well, guess what? I'm not an electrician, so I'm going to take an extra safety measure and I'm just going to put a little bit of tape around each of the connections. Okay, hopefully you could get a good idea and see what I was doing there. So now I got both my hots pigtailed as well as my ground. And we're ready to connect this to the receptacle. So again, I'm just going to tidy this up, strip a little more off it, and then I'm going to put my candy canes on every tip of the wiring, and we'll go from there. I'm not sure if I explained why a pigtail, but if you're running a circuit and say you got 8 different receptacles on a circuit and you're just wiring something for your house, that's designed to, so if you have any sort of short or sort of issue in one box, then you'll still have power into all the other receptacles within the circuit if something happens to one. If you don't do that and you have an issue with this receptacle box, then you're going to lose power to your entire circuit. So that's why you do pigtailing. All right, I got my candy cans in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this excess wiring, I'm going to accordion it down into the box and out of the way. So we got room to put our receptacle in after. Okay. All right, we are all done, ready to go. Circuit's complete. Obviously this would be pressed up against your wall, all secured, wire secured. And I'll just show you how to hook up into the panel. Okay, now that we've run our wire to the panel, I'm gonna give you a quick guide on how to hook up your double pole 20 amp breakers into the panel itself. Unless you're super confident in doing this, do not under any circumstances try and tackle this. This can kill you if you make a mistake. Hire an electrician to do this part. When I did it, I'm pretty comfortable with wiring, and I had a friend who was qualified to install the breakers for me. So I don't even touch the panel, but I'll give you just a quick guide on how you can do it, but I would highly suggest you hire an electrician to do this part. First thing you're gonna do is shut off the main power switch. Make sure you got some sort of lighting source because it's probably gonna be dark where you're working. Shut your main power switch to the off position. Then we're gonna go ahead and take this main faceplate off, held in by these screws here. Leave one tight screw into the very end and hold on to this faceplate so it doesn't just fall off. Okay, now that we're secure to the wall and we've run our new circuit with our receptacle boxes, everything's secure to the wall, your cable's fastened, your boxes are secure, you're gonna look something like I currently have over here. I just used this one for the example. Then we're gonna run at the other end of our AC90 wiring into the panel like so. Okay, so the other end of our wiring, I'm not going to get anywhere close because I'm working with a live panel right now. I'm just showing for demonstration. But your wiring is going to come into your breakers through the panel box just like this. Use those same bushings we had as used in the demo, those 3/8 bushings. You're going to punch the hole out through your panel box, secure your wire through that. Add your red bushing, secure it off on the other side. Once it's secured in the box, then you're going to just run a loop in the wire for some additional wiring into your box before you hook up into your breaker. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your grounding wire from where you came into your panel and you're going to connect that to your ground bar. There's a vertical ground bar with a bunch of screws and you'll see your other grounds connected to it. Go ahead, run your wire in behind, get it about 1/8 of an inch sticking through on the other side. Fasten your screw to the bar. Now you're grounded. Next thing you're gonna do, you're gonna have your breaker switch in your hand. You're gonna see your 2 hot terminals. You're then gonna take your hot wire, doesn't matter which one, secure it underneath the terminal in a straight fashion. You push it through, tighten your screw down. You're gonna do the same thing with your other hot wire. Push it through, secure it down. Now you're connected to your breaker. Your breaker's gonna sit on the main bar. You're gonna stick it in, set it straight, and it's going to snap into place. Once it's snapped into place, your hot wires are hooked up and your ground wire is hooked up, you're all done. Put your face plate back on your panel, got your main power back on, everything's hooked up like it's supposed to be at the wall. Go ahead, plug your miners in and start hashing away. You've successfully wired in a 220 volt ASIC miner. Hope this video helped you out, and happy hashing.